Hi, it's Ginger Walker with the Give Back team, and I am here with Second Lieutenant Deunty Digg. Hello, Deuntay.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Good.
And today we're at Warrior Coffee, and we are going to be discussing with Warrior Coffee and the Warrior Coffee Meetup. As you know, everyone is fighting a battle, and today we're talking to one of our local heroes, the Second Lieutenant Deunty Digg. And as you can see, he's actually in the photograph behind us here. And we're going to learn a little bit about his story, and it's just an amazing story. So, Deunty, again, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
So, most people might know you from the viral video. So, I'd like to start there, if that's okay.
Definitely.
And I think you became known as the dancing deputy. I saw in some of the social media posts. So, can you tell us a little bit about your exposure on social media from your experience with the dancing deputy?
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, Fred Parent came up with this idea to have the local sheriffs and chiefs come in and do a lip sync for a fundraiser for kids for school supplies. Mm-hmm. And so they reached out, and of course the sheriffs and the chiefs in the area said, we're not doing that, but we'll select someone from our departments. And at the time it was Sheriff Jett for the first year that I did it. He reached out and said, we know you sing and you dance and all of that type of stuff, would you be willing to do it? And I said yes. So I went out and I did Single Ladies by Beyonce. I'm a huge Beyonce fan. And so that year I won, and afterwards I got like 100,000 hits. Mm-hmm. And that was it, and life went back on as normal. So the next year I was invited back again, and I was trying to figure out a song, and I noticed that Formation was pretty hot with the kids and the youth. So I said, I'll do that. And I had a pretty busy schedule up to that point, so the night before, I was just watching the video over and over again and learning the lyrics and the dance moves. And so I went the next day to the Spotsylvania Town Center, and I performed the song. And so after it was done, I ended up winning, and I think it was the split that did it. And
it's actually pretty amazing, a split.
So it was about 30 seconds. And after that first week, I noticed that it had gone beyond 100,000 views or hits. And so I think it was 2 weeks after the performance that I heard you went viral. And I was like, okay, what does that mean?
Right,
you know?
right.
And so I was back to life as normal. Meanwhile, I started getting contacts from local news and things of that nature. Yep. And so it kind of fizzled out, and I went on with life. And the local high schools started reaching out and asking if I would dance with their dance teams. Mm-hmm. And so I agreed, and I danced for a couple of pep rallies. And it just so happened that North Stafford reached out, and I did a dance with their dance team for the halftime show for a pep rally. Mm-hmm. And the pep rally went really fast. And so one of the teachers came over and said, would you do the Beyonce dance that you did? And I was like, I haven't practiced that in a while, but we'll just go with it and see what happens. Yeah. And so I got out there and I did the dance, and it went super viral.
Crazy. It was it was insane.
And the kids responded. And the interesting thing with that was my mother was dying of cancer at the time. And so I had initially canceled that appearance. And she told me that, don't counsel on the kids. I'll be here when you get back. Wow. Go and keep your commitment. Mm-hmm. And so I'm out there, and it appears that I'm having a great time, but on the inside I'm hurting. Mm-hmm. And it was just such a strong connection with the kids in that moment. And it reached almost 90 million people internationally. And that was the send-off for my platform.
And then it took you to like national television. I
Yeah.
mean, I saw you on, I think it was Good Morning America.
Good Morning America.
America's
Got
Talent. You were on
Yeah.
there. It's amazing.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I don't know that anything really prepares you for going viral because like I was getting calls from different networks about documentaries and reality TV shows, and just so much was coming in at such a fast pace. I didn't really know how to handle it.
Right.
And so I realized rather quickly that I was gaining a platform and a bigger microphone for issues that are near and dear to my heart. And so I also recognized in that moment that law enforcement had a negative stigma, and so I had an opportunity to change some people's perspective. So there was a lot going on in that moment.
And you're with the Stafford County
Sheriff's
Department, or Sheriff's Office.
Yeah.
Sorry, oops. I said I was going to say that, wasn't I? So, and you've been with Stafford County for how long?
Almost 12 years now.
12 years. Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
So when you mentioned a platform, so I know that you have a very interesting growing up, how you
Yes.
grew up.
Yeah.
So would you give us a little bit of insight about your childhood and what brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, definitely. So I don't have very many positive memories of my childhood. And unfortunately, I grew up in a place where it was a single parent home. It was just my mother and myself and my two younger siblings at some point. And my mother was addicted to drugs and alcohol. And so it put us in places and situations as kids that you really shouldn't be in. And we also grew up in poverty. And so what that meant for me was there was some domestic abuse there. I went through years of molestation, dealing with depression, trying to survive each day, looking out as the oldest for my younger siblings. I really didn't start my education until I was much older.
Wow.
So I looked at school as a place to eat and to be safe, not necessarily as a place to learn. And so there were a lot of things going on in the background there. At one point, I attempted suicide. And so there was just, as I said before, a lot of different traumas and trying to work through that. And one of the things that I was taught as a child was what happens in this house stays in this house. And so I really didn't have a voice. And so my mother gave me away at 13 to strangers. And it touches on the racism issue that we are still dealing with as a nation. Because growing up, I was taught that, white people are racist and you have to be, wary of who you're around and who you hang out with. And so I go from this place of poverty and pain to this new environment that's predominantly white, from the Eastern Shore of Maryland to Gates County, North Carolina.
Okay.
And so I'm moving into this new life. And the thing that the family that my mother gave me to told me was, we want you to learn how to be a kid again. So I wasn't necessarily open about all the trauma because I was worried about how they would look at me,
Right.
and how they would treat me. And so I'm now in North Carolina, and I'm, for the first time as a freshman in high school, trying to figure out what is a verb, what is a noun, and
Wow.
how do I appear to be more intelligent than I really am, and I don't want to get picked on. And so there's just a lot there. And then I'm looking at issues like the battle flag of Northern Virginia, which is commonly called the Confederate flag. And half the family's displaying it, but they love me and they've accepted me as their own,
Right.
but yet it's seen as a racist symbol. And so what does that mean? And so I moved through that, and there are some lessons that I learned there as far as I wondered where my biological family was, because they didn't come for so long to check in on me. And I found out that my mother had lied to them about what she had done.
Oh, wow.
So some life lessons there as far as, make sure you have all the facts before you start to get emotional and or angry.
Right.
I learned that my brother, the event that really changed my trajectory was my brother trying to join a gang and me not knowing that's what he was doing. And so I go to help him and I interrupt his gang initiation. So he was given a choice: either you fight with us and beat your brother up, or you and your brother get beat up and you're not going to be a part of this gang anymore.
Oh my gosh.
And so up to that point, everything I had did was to protect him and my baby brother, and he chose the gang over me.
Wow.
And so how do you deal with that? And so that was part, if that had never happened, then I would have never left and went to North Carolina, because I would have never left my brothers behind. And so as I'm in North Carolina, I'm growing up, I would find out the reason that he did that was back when we were children and the molestation was going on. He would be laying feet away from me, and I thought that he was asleep. And in his mind, he was awake. All he wanted me to do was fight. And so he had built up some resentment against me because of that. And what he didn't know was that I was told that if I didn't do it, that he would have to.
Oh, wow.
And so life lessons again learned, just going back and trying to understand why things happened the way they did.
Right.
And it didn't appear as simple as it was on the surface.
Sure.
So I buckled down and I catch up in school. And so in North Carolina, my focus was going into the military because I knew that I was physically fit. I still wasn't as confident about going to college. But my family at the time, this is when the Iraq War is starting, they tell me, if you go to college and then go in the military, you'll make more money. And that's all I needed to hear was more money. So that became my focus. And so I eventually worked to where I get accepted to the Virginia Military Institute, and I move into that new chapter of my life.
So while you were there, because I did do a little research on you, can you tell us a little bit about, I think that there was a self-discovery period for you while you were at VMI.
Definitely.
So how did that come to fruition for you?
With being at VMI, one of the pillars is the honor court or the honor code, and it's cadet will not lie, cheat, steal, nor tolerate those who do. And it's something that's ingrained with you and it will stay with you for the rest of your life. And when I got there, I took that to heart. And so all through my childhood, it was surviving day to day. I get to the new chapter, which is North Carolina, and my high school experience, and I am trying to learn what it means to be a kid again, and I'm dealing with a lot of internal issues from my childhood, but I'm not really vocalizing that because I'm afraid of judgment. And at some point, there were a couple of times in high school where I realized that I had an attraction to men, but I quickly dismissed it because of my faith and just knowing that in the home that I was in, it wouldn't be accepted.
Okay.
And so I was worried about being rejected and sent back. And I knew if I was sent back, then I wouldn't have an opportunity to make it, if you will.
Right.
So I get to VMI, and it's the first time where I'm on my own. I'm in this chaotic, crazy place. But I'm starting to learn who I am as a person, and I realized that I'm gay. And so I couldn't have picked the worst time to come out, but I told a friend, or a brother rat is VMI lingo. I started with, I think I'm bi. And I checked her response, and she was like, okay, it doesn't really matter. And then I said, well, I think I'm gay. And then I said the magic words, don't tell anybody.
Right.
And so, of course, she did. And by the next morning, the entire Corps knew. And I'm really, based off of my childhood, one of my things that I pay attention to is body language. And I can tell when people they're off a little bit. And so that next morning, sitting at the breakfast table with some of my brother rats, I could tell, I'm like, why are they staring at me?
Something isn't what it was the day before.
Definitely. And so I came out, and it was a struggle. though the entire Corps wasn't against me, there were enough people that it felt that way.
Right.
And so, we had to deal with multiple issues. Not only that, but being a black male, and just there were so many different things going on. And so I just put my head down and decided to work through it. And at some point, I called the family that took me in North Carolina. And actually, before I called them, I wrote a letter saying, I've discovered this about myself. This is who I am, and I want you to accept me. And I didn't hear anything. I think it was maybe 2 weeks later, I give them a call. And then, talking to them on the phone, talking to my father, he disowned me at that point.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was probably, out of all the things that I've experienced up to that point, that was the most hurtful thing. And so in that moment, I had to figure out, what I was going to do. And what I found through that was that I have to love myself and respect myself before I expected anybody else to. So I was still trying to learn who I was, and I had some self-hatred going on there. And so I spent basically the next year in isolation, so to speak.
So as far as an acceptance perspective, how was the rest of the family outside of your father? Were they accepting of you at that time?
They were. I didn't know it at the time because of being at VMI, being in the rat line. You're kind of cut off from the outside world. So when I had that initial conversation, I took it as representative of the entire family. And I would later find out that it wasn't the case.
That's good. So you're at VMI, you graduate.
Yeah.
Where do you go then? Like, what's the next step for you?
So my intent was to go into the military full-time versus the National Guard or the reserves. But what held me back from that was being gay, the don't ask, don't tell policy. And my fear was that I would work really hard and then lose it all based off of just that. And so with losing the family and them cutting off all ties, I had to figure out how I was going to be able to stay at VMI. So I ended up joining the National Guard and doing some work study programs to have money to make it through. And towards the end of my time at VMI, I was put on trial, or I was put in a hearing, and they tried to kick me out of the program because I failed a PT test. And so I would learn that it was based off of my sexual orientation, not so much about the PT test. And I learned that from several cadets who eventually wrote letters for me.
So you did have support then,
I did.
support.
At this point, I had gained support. The first year, people were like, you're not a part of us. We don't want you here. The second year, I started, even though people were negative to me, I still gave love. I would go and help the people that were at the back of the pack that couldn't run. And, some of the things they would say, we don't get away from us, faggot, or stuff like that. And even though they were saying things like that, I would still help them. And I found that I had to be at the front of the pack. I had to know movements, and I had to be a resource that they would have to come to even if they didn't want to. And that's how I bridged the gap there. And so they put me on the hearing. I beat the hearing. I'm sent to the leadership advancement course, and I start working through it. And ultimately, when I got out of VMI, I decided to do the National Guard Reserve route versus going active duty. And I went into retail. And I realized rather quickly that retail just wasn't for me. The people that I worked with didn't really have a passion. I didn't feel like I was really giving back. It was just like clock in, clock out. And so I was like, there's got to be more to life than this. And so at the time, all of that was kind of going on in the background, and I'm trying to figure out, what am I going to do? I found out that the unit that they were sending me to for the transitioning out of National Guard into the reserves was going to be led by the same officer that had started the hearing at VMI.
Oh.
And so ultimately I would separate from the military. And that really hurt because it was kind of like one of those things I knew it was going to happen and it finally happened.
Right.
And so from that point, I had a mother, or she became my mother. She was kind of landlord / friend from one of my rats at VMI. And she said, you can come to Fredericksburg. You can live with me. I won't charge you anything. And I want you to focus on paying off your college debt. And that's for how well you treated my son and how you looked out for him. So it's interesting how all of these things just kind of fell into place. And one day, my car was broken into and my wallet was stolen. And so I called, the Fredericksburg Police Department, and they came out to take a report. And me and the officer just were talking, and she said, you can go into law enforcement as paramilitary, and your sexual orientation doesn't matter. And I think you'd be a good fit. And so I had never really thought about going into law enforcement.
Right.
Growing up the way that I did, you didn't call the cops.
Right.
There was a fear of law enforcement. And so all of that kind of played a role. But I was like, what the heck, I'll try it. And so at the time I applied for the FBI. I was going through their process, and I applied with Fredericksburg, Stafford, and Spotsylvania. And during my interview, I didn't get called in for an interview with Fredericksburg or Spotsylvania, but Stafford called me. And during my interview, I told them I'm in the process with the FBI, but whoever hires me first is where I will go, and I'll commit to staying. And so Stafford hired me, and the rest is history.
That's awesome. Well, I'm thankful that Stafford hired you because we're sitting in Stafford right now.
Yeah.
And I personally live in Stafford, and I know that you performed that dance. Actually, my daughter was there that day. So,
Awesome.
So you're definitely a shining example to the local community. And in learning more about your story, I do want to touch a little bit on a book that you've written.
Yeah.
So Beneath the Scar is a book that Deuntay wrote. And I'm sure that there's a lot more in there than what we were even just talking about.
Definitely.
But I also know that it's now a movie that will be premiering. Can you tell us a little bit about your movie and when it's premiering?
Yeah, definitely. So the documentary is premiering at Paragon on June 19th. There's going to be 2 screenings, one at 7 and one at 8:30. And it's taking the book and it's putting in a visual platform or method for people, because not everybody likes to read. And it's also for people that have read it. They're like, when is book number 2 coming? And so this is kind of one of those things that bring the readers and the fans up to where I am currently. And it gives me a little bit more time to work on book number 2. And so what I've done with it is I've linked it to charity. And we're going to raise $10,000 for Big Brothers and Sisters, Greater Fredericksburg.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
So all of the ticket sales and all of the sponsorship goes to Big Brothers and Big Sisters, and we've raised about $9,000.
Wow, that's fantastic.
So I'm very excited about it. And the night of the premiere or the screenings, we are doing a red carpet. And we're going to do pictures, and it's a special night for me because I get to see, my story and me on the big screen, but it's also about having these hard conversations and touching on the pain that so many people are struggling with in silence. And so I get to be a part of something where, people get to come out, and I've said this several times, if you don't have nice clothes, wear your sweatpants, wear your sweatshirt, just bring a smile and have fun.
Sure.
And we just get to give back to the community. And so I'm very excited about it. And then afterwards, we'll see where it goes.
That's fantastic. And I'm all about giving back. And
yeah.
I know this, being at Warrior Coffee Shop as well, this is a platform about giving back with learning people's stories and getting messages out there. And if people are experiencing things in their childhood, like as you did, being able to identify with your story is just fantastic. That you're a shining example of how where you came from and where you are today, and who knows where you'll be going, because your future is so bright. But just a little bit personally, I know you're married.
I am.
And I believe you're married to the Teacher of the Year.
Yes.
So you want to tell us a little bit about him?
Yeah, so Benjamin Diggs, he took my last name. So we dated for about 7 years before we got married. So there's a lot of sevens in our life.
Is that good luck, 7?
I think so.
Well, for you it is.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So we got married 7/7/17.
Oh, wow.
My badge number 17. We
Oh,
dated
wow.
for 7 years. So there's just a lot of sevens there. But I'm very proud of him, and he gives a lot. And his focus is the youth in the community as well. So what makes our relationship work so well is that he understands, my focus and my goal, and we share that in common. We're both very passionate about our jobs. And so he's Teacher of the Year this year. And he's not only Teacher of the Year for North Stafford, but he's Teacher of the Year for the county. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just so proud of him. And we really support one another. And so we feed off of one another, and we try to make a difference and do it for the right reasons.
That's awesome. And so I know that you also have a cooking show.
Yes.
Cooking with Love,
yeah.
Right?
Yes.
So if people want to watch you cook, they can watch you on is it Facebook?
Facebook Live.
Do you want to tell them where they can find you on Facebook?
Yes. So if you actually go to my website, because there's Deunty.Diggs and Deunty Diggs on Facebook, but if you go to DeuntayDiggs.com, all of my social media is there, and they can catch the show just by clicking on the link there. And it's amazing because my husband's actually an introvert. And
sometimes you hear him in the background, though. I think I've seen him a couple
times. And he washes
times.
the dishes, and he's always cleaning. Like, I'm like, get in front of the camera. But we had an interesting experience. So what I wanted to do with this was, when we started Cooking with Love, was kind of bring people in from the community. And what better way to engage people than bringing them in for food in your home? I can't think of a better way. So it was kind of an idea that we launched with, and it's just really worked. And we've kind of created a Cooking with Love family. Mm-hmm. And so my husband, being an introvert, didn't really want to be on camera. And so one night we were doing it. I said, let's just cut on the camera. And he's like, no, I really don't want to. And he burned the oil. And he's a perfectionist. So he was like, I'm done with this. Cut the camera off. He's behind the camera. And I'm like, come on. People make mistakes. It's all right. But the next day, after it was all said and done, we got a message from a mother who had found her son's journal. And in the journal, he had talked about wanting to commit suicide because he's gay, and he didn't feel like he could lead a normal life. And so the night before, he was watching Benjamin and I, and him and his mother were laughing and going back and forth about it. And he wrote about how much that meant to him.
Wow.
And so her sending that message kind of brought him out of his shell a little bit. So you see him a little bit more on the camera now. Mm-hmm. He doesn't really like it, but he understands the importance, not only for just adults, but the youth and where we are now and currently in the nation and the climate. So everything I do is about positivity and really inspiring and uplifting. Mm-hmm.
So if you had one message for the youth today, mm-hmm. What would that be? What would be what you want to tell people about you, and the example that you want to have set forward for people to know about you? The one big shining thing.
I would say for me, the most important thing is perspective. Mm-hmm. Everything kind of works around that. Being positive. Sometimes people say I'm too optimistic, and you're dreaming, your head's too far up in the clouds. But life is truly about perspective and hard work. And so I look at life as, some people say, is the glass half full or half empty. I'm just thankful to have a glass. And
I like that.
Yeah, I just for me, when the people around me are okay and in a good place, then I'm good. And so perspective, work hard, and when people tell you no, keep going, find your yes, because it's out there. I like that
too. I love that. Well, so where can they find the book?
So the book is on Amazon,
okay.
And it's also on my website. And so if you go to the website and you order it, I actually autograph it, sign it, and send it out myself. So you can get it there as well.
Oh, that's great. And then for the movie after the premiere, can we see it anywhere else after that?
So right now we plan to send it out to some film festivals, and we've already had a hit. There's some people from Netflix that are interested in it.
Wow.
So we'll see where it goes. We don't know which network. We're going to also try for HBO, and so we're going to start sending it out and seeing who bites.
That's awesome. Well, I'm excited. I'm excited to read the book. I haven't read your book yet, so I am going to get a copy of it signed, and possibly come and see the movie too if I can get in. I don't know if tickets are sold out, right?
So what has happened, and Paragon has been very good with me on this. They initially gave us a theater that was 100 seats, and that sold out for the first showing. So we moved it up to 130. And that was sold out. And so I was like,
Wow.
Is there anything else, any other wiggle room can we get? And they were like, we can give you 10 more seats. So I'll take it. So right now, I think we have about maybe 6 or so seats left for the first showing. Mm-hmm. And we have probably about 30 to 40 for the second showing.
Oh, great. Okay.
So there's still tickets and there's still time. And yeah, just come out and have a good time. And you're coming on Cooking with Love, right?
I'm so excited to do that. I can't wait. I cannot wait. I'm going to have to get a special apron and everything. Anyway, well, I really appreciate you sitting down and chatting with me and telling us your story, because I think that gives people perspective behind the Dancing Deputy, which did do such great things and gave you a platform to talk about your story and hopefully touch other people's lives. I know it did mine. And again, you can see the photo of Deuntay here in Warrior Coffee, and we do a Business Warrior meetup, and that's for the local residents of Stafford County, anyone in the surrounding area. It's the first and third Thursday of the month from 6 to 10 p.m. or 6 to 9 p.m. So you can find more information about that as well on the website. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I got to hug you.
Give
I'm
me
a
a hug.
hugger.
Yeah, I was like,